Before I walk you through the process of finding information in a journal article, I thought it might be helpful to explain a bit about why you might use a process like this in other situations and why the summaries you complete for class include the content they include. When we're thinking about research, having our own process for summarizing studies can make it easier and quicker to understand journal articles. It also helps us avoid what I call accidental plagiarism if we make sure to focus on primary source information and only use the summary when we need to refer back to the study. You might not use journal articles in other classes or in your future career, but you probably will have projects that require compiling information and making sure you give credit appropriately. The overall idea of the article summary can be helpful in situations like that because it's basically a model for gathering the same information from multiple sources in a way that makes it easier to refer back to later. In this class, the summaries have three purposes. First, they'll help you identify examples of each of the research methods concepts you're learning about so that you can see how they're used in actual studies conducted by experienced researchers. That will also help you focus on primary source information when you look at articles, which helps us, myself included, avoid getting too overwhelmed with the other parts of the article. By focusing on the primary source information, we're also isolating the parts of the article that influence the results and, therefore, how the study actually contributes to our knowledge. That said, each researcher tends to have their own approach to article summaries and might have different approaches depending on the project they're working on. So the fact that we'll use this template for class doesn't mean that it's the only way to go about gathering important information. It also doesn't mean that the information we'll focus on is the only part that's important. It's just what's important for our purpose. Having the article title and abstract in the summary helps in a few ways. When we're looking at the article for the first time, the abstract provides an overview and helps us know what we're looking for in other parts of the article. Later, when we refer back to the summary, that overview also helps refresh our memory before we look at the details in other sections. The second section goes along with the abstract to help us understand the study. It's where we include information about the purpose, goal, research questions, and/or the hypothesis. You might remember the questions and hypotheses bring together a few parts of the study. Given that, finding the questions and/or hypothesis helps us know what we're looking for in the method. When the authors include a purpose or goal, it provides additional context about the results. Those statements explain what the authors are trying to add to our knowledge. The third section is labeled Recruiting. This is where we'll include information about what the researchers did to obtain the participants for the study, including how they contacted potential participants, as well as any criteria people have had to meet to be included, and any incentives offered for participation. One way to think about it is that we're asking, how did potential participants find out about the study? And then, could everyone who was interested participate? And did they receive any benefit for participation? Then, in the sample section, we'll include details about the participants in the study. These details help us think about the representativeness of the sample, and given that, what we need to keep in mind when we think about how the results add to our knowledge. After the sections about who participated in the study, we move on to the section about what was included, the variables. The idea of this section is to have enough information to completely understand the operational definition of each variable. As you may have gathered by now, understanding the operational definition is important to know what the results really mean, and completing this section will help you think about the related details. Notice that the heading row for this section includes the details we tried to include for each type of variable. I'll explain how to find that information in the summary demonstration recordings. After we have the information about the variables, we can make a quick note about the research design. Given the way the design influences what we know from the study, it's a helpful cue for interpreting the results. Which brings us to the last section of the summary, the results. Each article includes details about how the data was analyzed to address the research questions or test the hypotheses. In the case of quantitative studies, that means there's a section explaining the statistical analysis and results of that analysis. In a qualitative study, the analysis process is explained in words. It isn't necessary to understand the statistics or the qualitative analysis process to understand the results of the study, though. We'll learn more about statistics before the end of the class, But for now, we'll read strategically to identify the findings and avoid getting overwhelmed by the details. Each section of the summary we'll use for class helps us identify the details we need to understand the results of the study and how those results contribute to our knowledge. The process of compiling information for the summaries will give you an opportunity to see examples of each of the concepts and learn to focus on the parts of the article that are a primary source. Those are also the parts of the article that help answer the questions for scientific literacy we learned about earlier in class. Even if you don't create another article summary after this class, you'll probably have a project that requires a systematic process of gathering and organizing information. Completing these summaries can help you think about creating your own process for those situations.